The House Criminal Justice Committee will come to order. Will the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Hope.
Here.
Representatives Andrews.
Here.
Carter.
Here.
Breen.
Present.
Young.
Here.
Arvid. Devendorf.
Here.
Cerniglu.
Here.
Filler.
Yes.
Mueller.
Here.
Bazat.
Here.
Harris.
Here.
Begol.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have 12 members present. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. Representative Andrews moves to adopt the minutes from the March 5th meeting. Without objection, the minutes are adopted. I'll make my standard announcement today. If you would like to speak during testimony today, you need to turn in a white card, which are available in various locations in this room and outside this room. We just need to have your name and such for the minutes. We'll now hear testimony on House Bills 5124, 5125, and 5126. And I'd welcome Representatives Lightner and Bollin up to the table. Okay. Oh yeah, she's on here. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. So today we have 3 bills before you to talk about in regards to fentanyl, probation, and sentencing guidelines. And I just want to give a brief history on this. So this package of bills, this is the 3rd session we have dropped these. Last session, 2020, I get it. We had a little, situation in the country, in the world with the pandemic. So not much got done. We didn't have committee hearings, et cetera, et cetera. So then we go to last term. So last term, Representative Alexander, LeGrand, and Anthony had these bills, these very same bills. Worked them through the process. They passed the House with overwhelming bipartisan support. I think there were only maybe 3 nays in the entire chamber. They got to the Senate, went to Judiciary, got a hearing. They also passed out of the Senate Judiciary Committee, overwhelming support again. Numerous organizations also support it. Community members, obviously, and members of the public who have lost loved ones due to this pandemic of fentanyl users, trafficking, and possession. So anyways, so here we are again, the 3rd time. And again, just so you know, I have some other guests here with me. I have the Reisner family here. I have Mike Hurst here from the Jackson County community. I also have my prosecutor, Jerry Jarzinka, here as well. So anyways, with that, I just want to give a super quick synopsis of what this is. These bills basically prioritize increased penalties for dealers, traffickers, and people in possession of fentanyl and fentanyl-related drugs. Rep. Bollin's bill changes the health code and the potential terms of imprisonment and fines. And my bill allows for another tool in the toolbox for prosecutors and courts. With the emphasis on our treatment courts and subsequent success of those courts, it's been determined that some classification of drug charges should be placed in some sort of probation program rather than prison. This bill will provide a possible alternative to prison for those other drugs, with the exception of fentanyl, heroin, and other derivatives of fentanyl. Rep. Witwer's bill changes the sentencing guidelines to incorporate the new changes in the other 2 bills. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Rep. Bollin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. First, I'd like to say I have appreciated working with both Rep. Lightner and Witwer, both whom I call friends. We've had many conversations about the devastating effects of fentanyl and other drugs, and have witnessed it firsthand with families and friends. So thank you very much for the opportunity to testify on House Bill 5124, which would amend a section of the Public Health Code. This is the section that prohibits the manufacture, creation, distribution, or possession of a controlled substance with the intent to distribute. The bill creates a new category of controlled substances and creates a higher penalty for heroin, fentanyl, and other derivatives of heroin, fentanyl, carfentanil, and any opiate. We know that these potent drugs are surfacing as frequent killers of so many in our communities. Fentanyl is contaminating heroin, meth, cocaine, and fake prescription pills. This drug alone is attributed to over 100,000 overdose deaths in a 12-month period and is increasingly responsible for the growing number of accidental overdoses. It was recently reported that more than 67% of drug overdoses involve fentanyl. Synthetic opioids are the primary drivers of overdose deaths in the United States, rising over 35% from 2020 to 2021 alone. Prescription drug addiction and fake prescription drugs are taking their toll on Michigan families. We must do whatever we can to stop this trend. Many of us know someone whose life has been completely shattered by these horrible drugs. We may also know individuals who have risen out of addiction and want to stay on the straight and narrow and a drug-free life. We can combat this drug problem by increasing the penalties and putting the awfully bad actors away. Our drug courts have been successful in helping people beat their drug habits for lower classified drugs, even some Schedule I and II drugs. We want to support these successful efforts, but we must do something to stop the penetration of these drugs throughout society. We do want to offer the courts, including our judges and prosecutors, the flexibility they need to ensure we are meeting our goal of getting these drugs off the streets and making sure the offenders pay for their part in these heinous crimes. As such, we have offered a substitute for this bill based on further consideration and input from stakeholders. The original language was drafted with the intention of allowing judges more flexibility in sentencing for other substance trafficking charges and to dedicate the necessary resources to fentanyl prosecution. While this is still our intention, I do not believe we need to decrease the repercussions for trafficking non-opiate drugs to accomplish our goal. As such, the substitute neither decriminalizes the trafficking of other substances nor takes sentencing tools away from our judges. It merely increases statutory maximums for the trafficking of these known lethal drugs. Thank you again for the opportunity to address the committee, and I look forward to your support to ensure we reduce together the fatal effects and damage these horrible drugs have on our family and friends. Thank you.
Madam Chair, do you want our guests to come up and in the prosecutor and then do questions?
Sure, let's have Prosecutor Jarzinka come on up, and then we can have questions.
Good morning. Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear today and speak on behalf of this bill. I'll just keep it short. You know, as a prosecutor, I'm in the field, my community. So, you know, fentanyl is killing people. It's been killing people. And it's not just my county, but other counties in the state of Michigan and our country, our states. It's a huge problem. And there's a couple of families here today, the Hearst family and the Reisner family, who I've met. I know a number of families, they've lost loved ones because of heroin, fentanyl. So it's a pretty serious problem. And I've testified on this package before, and it's frustrating to me as a prosecutor to see death and destruction and pretty clearly limited to this particular drug, and nothing being done about it. Because as a prosecutor, you know, one of the parts of this bill I really like is increasing the sentencing grid for delivery of fentanyl and its derivatives and heroin less than 50 grams. Because on the street, you know, people are not dealing with large amounts on sales. And so the consequence of that is that if you have a D grid, you're likely not going to go to prison. B grid is like a meth lab. You know, it's going to give the judge a tool that he can sentence that person in prison, unless he makes an exception. So for a prosecutor and a judge, I think that's really important. Just that little section alone gives us some tools to work with to try to deal with this serious problem. And you can bet your bottom dollar that the individuals who are dealing this, they know all about sentence guidelines. They know all about what kind of potential penalties are involved. Because if you're convicted, you go to court, you get sentenced, they know how to calculate the son's guidelines as well as the prosecutor, defense attorney, and the judge. They know the impact of that. So having it just for that section of B grid alone in the other penalties, that definitely sends a message. We need to do something more than we're doing to stop people from dying from fentanyl. You know, it is such a deadly drug that even, 5 or 6 grams or particles, grains of that will kill you. So imagine you're getting a kilo of fentanyl. Recently we had a search warrant and a kilo of fentanyl was found in our county. And that's enough fentanyl to kill everybody in my county. We have 160,000 people. So that's a good word picture to keep in mind. That's just one example. What about the rest of the state? And how many kilos are out there coming into our state? With that said, I would just add that, this is a public safety issue. Like the families I've talked to who've lost loved ones from fentanyl, especially now, and heroin, they always ask me, well, Jerry, what's being done about this? So I'm here this morning, to support this legislation. I think we need to take some action. I think we have the power to do that. I'd seriously ask you to support this bill.
Thank you. We do have a couple of questions from members. Representative Filler.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks for taking on the fentanyl crisis. We've been working on this for a couple terms, and it's just a massive, massive issue. I guess the purpose when I worked on this before with now Speaker Tate and Rep. LeGrand and Julie Alexander was to not only raise the penalties for fentanyl, manufacture and distribution or intent to deliver, but was also to right-size the justice system when it came to codeine, ecstasy, and some of the clearly lower, and magic mushrooms too. Thanks, Chair. And so I haven't seen the sub, or I've only glanced at the sub. Is it similar to our bills that were run the last 2 terms, or is it a little bit different? I just was hoping for a little clarification.
It's very similar. So right now, Schedule 1 and 2, that the classification stayed the same. The difference is going to be in like the probation arena. So fentanyl has its own. You should have gotten this little chart. It basically says all Schedule 1 and 2, with the exception of fentanyl and fentanyl derivatives, is what I'm going to call it, will be the same class and same sentencing guidelines. Fentanyl is its own new category of guidelines.
So a similar bill to what we ran before, maybe just a little phrased differently.
Sure.
Representative Breen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for bringing these bills forward. We lost my brother's best friend to fentanyl. So thank you. I have a multi-part question. I'm wondering, are other states, do they have enhanced penalties like this? If so, has there been any impact on overdoses in those states? I'd like to know, I want to just clarify, there's nothing in here that impacts somebody's ability if they are caught with one of these drugs to enter treatment court if it's deemed appropriate. And I know that we've also seen an increase in xylazine being used to cut fentanyl, and I'm wondering if there's any other trends that we should be looking at when it comes to fentanyl when these cases come forward that we might be able to address. So I know it's couple questions, but answer them however you want. Okay.
Sure. As far as other states, specifically, I don't have any information about exactly what they're doing. However, I do know from other prosecutors that, fentanyl is like our serious problem we have in our state. It's the same problem in other states, and I know there's other actions trying to address that issue, but I don't have any specific information to give you on that.
And I want to address the part in regards to, you talked about treatment courts a little bit. So under these bills, I have the probation bill basically. So right now, drug offenses aren't really eligible for, these bad drugs, I'm going to call them, aren't eligible for treatment courts right now. So under my bill, Schedule 1 and 2 drugs can be used unless it is a fentanyl product, is what fentanyl or a derivative of fentanyl. Because obviously fentanyl by itself, it's very rare that you have fentanyl by itself, but you'll have maybe cocaine, marijuana, whatever. It could be laced, with fentanyl. So those won't be eligible still because, it's the most lethal right now for us. So other than that, the other drugs now would actually be eligible. So like cocaine, you could be eligible for treatment court if you got caught with cocaine. As, before you couldn't.
Thank you.
Representative Devendorf.
So I have a couple questions, but they are connected. I would say I am also curious as to what data exists that show that increasing penalties on drug crimes is a deterrent. And I'm also curious as to why at this point in history we would ever add without parole to a life sentence when we're trying to talk about rehabilitation. And in this case, rehabilitation in its purest form. So in addition to that, I am curious as to what real justification there would be to excluding the drug that we are most concerned about at this juncture from access or opportunity for drug treatment court, when we really want to get to the root of the problem.
I'll answer this question. Well, you're right, Representative Devendorf. The one penalty in here is life without parole. That's, in Michigan, we only have that penalty for first-degree murder. We don't have the death penalty. We've never had the death penalty in the state of Michigan, so that is our death penalty. So it's very serious. But to me, that application be very limited, and what we're seeing based on the numbers, this drug is killing people. So it is murder, and it's intentional, and it's for profit. That is focused on those dealers who are just dealing for profit. They don't use the drug. This is just a business deal. So in essence, they're basically cutting a deal and they're killing people, and they know that. They don't care. So that's why the provision, I think, in my opinion, is in there. It's very serious. I don't think that's going to result in lots and lots of defendants getting sentenced to that, but it exists. The other part is that, as Representative Lightner has said, there are some carve-out positions here in this proposed legislation for other drugs too, for the judges to take into consideration as far as treatment. But for fentanyl, I would go again to my statement that this is a public safety issue. It's killing people. It really is. And that even the stat thrown out there, 100,000 people died from drug overdose deaths, and 2/3 of them are fentanyl related. So what does that tell you? It's pretty deadly. So I understand what you're saying. However, with fentanyl, its impact is so severe that it needs to be addressed in this legislation that way.
May I follow up with that?
Yeah, if you could especially clarify if there's any data to support that increasing penalties actually hinders fentanyl addiction.
Well, I think it's a little early to tell and do any kind of comparisons. What we are is we do have the stats that show fentanyl is increasingly killing people in our communities, our families and friends, and we just cannot sit back and wait. What this does is increase the penalties for people with the intent to distribute, create it, manufacture it, distribute it. These are bad, very bad actors. The treatment courts are still available for people that are using drugs. I think it is a different line in the sand to people that are, intentionally trying to encourage more addiction and problems. The treatment courts we have found to be very successful in most cases. And so we want to continue to afford that flexibility, and as we continue to see more data. But the data is there showing that we have increased numbers in fentanyl, and it's being disguised, it's being laced in other fake prescription drugs. I mean, it's on our streets. And I don't think that we should be trying to reward all horribly bad behavior.
I want to add something to that too. I don't have any specific data on that. However, I can give you an example. You know, in the past, we had a severe problem with meth labs, especially in our county. And so the legislature passed significantly penalties for operating meth labs. They made it a B grid. And so now, eventually, meth labs don't really exist. I mean, they're very rare now to see. That's part of the reason, but that was a very harsh penalty if anyone involved with that. So,
Well, and to add to that also, you asked about the data. Well, one of the things we're seeing right now is a situation in Oregon. So they went lax on their drug laws and reformed that. Well, now they're rolling them back because it's actually done the opposite of what they thought it would do. So we know that being lax on penalties doesn't work, clearly. So that's kind of a trend right now. You can look into that like offline. But Oregon, check out Oregon.
Before we get to your other testifiers, I'd like to let Rep. Arbit have the last member question before we move on.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And yeah, I mean, I think the point about Oregon is clearly instructive. You know, I would probably venture that no one on this committee supports full decriminalization. It hasn't worked. But I do want to hone in on something Representative Devendorf said, and this is for the sponsors. Are you open to compromise on the scheduling grid? Because, you know, as I'm thinking, and the prosecutor spoke to this, that you know, first degree is I think it's what you said, the only other crime that we have life without parole for. I'm thinking, like, if you're gang raping a child, or if you're bombing a church, or, you know, a house of worship or something, you don't get life without parole. And I get that drug trafficking is a very, very serious crime. But to me, if Michigan criminal statute, the penal code, does not specify life without parole, except for, you know, some very limited circumstance, I'm not sure why this would merit that versus, you know, other crimes. So I'm just wondering if you are open to compromise on the scheduling grid.
Well, like our prosecutor mentioned, most of these people are essentially murderers. They're doing it for the dollar. Mm-hmm. You know, we can have a conversation, but I'm not entirely sure I'm on the same page. I'll just say it in an open forum, because, you know, we all have a story with fentanyl, heroin, whatever, our families. And you'll hear from some of my community members here in just a moment. But, you know, as is right now, a lot of these dealers are like, it's, you know, a slap on the hand right now. So I think to get real serious on penalties could help decrease that, or make them at least, you know, take a second look at what they're doing. So again, from my perspective, dealers are murderers. It's first-degree murder to me. They know what they're doing. They know the consequences of their action, and they still choose to put it in our communities and kill our people.
And I'm not arguing it's not a very heinous crime.
Yeah,
I'm just saying,
so
if we don't do it for other things,
I'm
you know.
just saying that's where I'm at, and that's the
Representatives,
discussion I'd be willing to have.
We do need to move on to the other folks you've brought here to testify, so we're going to conclude that. And I'm sure it'll resume some other time. I appreciate your testimony, sir.
thank you.
And I'll now call up Mr. Mike Hurst and Ms. Julie Risner. Either one of you, welcome to start whenever you're ready. Yeah, make sure you press the red button.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. Thank you all including Representatives Lightner, Bollin, and Witwer, for giving our family the opportunity to share our son's story with you. This is my third time. You'd think it'd be getting easier, but I'm still nervous, so bear with me. Our son was a great young man, wonderful student, family member, loving, caring son, brother, and dear uncle to two lovely nieces. And I'd like to spend most of my time just talking about what a delight he was, but I really need to get to the heart of the matter, which is fentanyl, killing our loved ones, murdering our loved ones. About 10 years, Chris was struggling with an opiate addiction, going to recovery, and our family reached out to Mike Hurst, knew that he had lost a son, and wondered if maybe he couldn't help guide us. So we met with Mike, and Chris and Mike formed a bond. And Mike gave Chris a purpose in life by asking him to go with him to our community schools and speak to the students. Chris had a non-filtered way of sharing his story that really cut to the chase of the matter and really made an impact on these students. He didn't want one other family to have to go through what he was going through for us. So Mike took him to schools, and they even went to like Macomb Community College. And through these speaking engagements, Chris also met Jerry Jarzinka, who was starting the Jackson Heroin Task Force and was invited to be the guest speaker at the very first drug summit that was held. Chris also met and got to be friends with Congressman Wahlberg. They sat on several drug panels throughout the community, Lenawee County. And he also spoke in front of state police officers, doctors, nurses. He was giving a new face to the addict because he came from a family like any one of yours. During Chris and Mike going to schools talking, Chris reached out to Mike and said, "I think I know what'll help me stay away from drugs." He said, "I need to get my dealer off the street." So Mike introduced him to a detective or sergeant from JNET, which is our Jackson Narcotic Enforcement Team. And they set up a sting operation. And Chris wore a wire. He was given money. The scene was staged with undercover cops. He went into the apartment complex with a code word to hit the floor if things went bad. That should just be on TV, not in our lives. So he did the deal, went back to the state police post, and at that time, he turned over the drugs, and later that evening, they went and arrested the dealer. So he was put in jail, bonded out in, I think, 3 or 4 days, and immediately started hounding Chris with text messages saying that, "Hey, I need to pay my lawyer. I got some good stuff. Come see me." So there was a pretrial. Things came out, and the dealer found out that Chris had ratted on him. So Chris and a friend were going downtown one night to have a drink, and he walked into a bar, saw that the dealer had 4 family members in there. So they turned around, walked out the front door before followed him. So they thought, well, probably safer inside. So they went around to the back door, came back in, and he was jumped and beaten, taken to the hospital. So my brave son said, that's not going to happen. So he met with Jerry Jarzinka, and he said, I want to prosecute these guys. So the 4 of them were prosecuted for witness intimidation. This took place over a year's time. He kept going in front of the hearings and testifying, and was suffering with depression and anxiety. So after it was all done and said, the 4 that were charged with witness intimidation got a range of 5 to 10 years. The dealer who originally JNET told our son would get, he's a mid to upper level dealer, he'll get between 8 and 12 years. This judge sentenced him to 3. So my son put himself and our family in harm's way for this man to go away for 3 years, of which he told Chris on several occasions, I'll do a couple of years. I'll do a few years. I make good money. I got lots of money salted away. I'm good with a few years in prison. And sure enough, he did his time, got out, and was back in prison, I think within 6 months. So that took place over maybe a year and a half time, and Chris continued, even though, he had good days and bad days. He'd go with Mike, they'd go to schools, they'd speak. And in September of 2016, Chris overdosed. At that time, he went into rehab, he came out, he was opiate-free for 2 years, until November of 2018. And we had a family trip planned to Disney with our daughter and his two little nieces, our granddaughters. So I took Chris 2 days before Thanksgiving. We went up to Briarwood Mall shopping. He had to get some Disney clothes, which included a Mickey Mouse t-shirt to wear to please his nieces. So we came home that night, and the next morning, he put all his stuff out on his couch. He was still living with us as he was healing. And he came out about 9 o'clock, said, I'm going to bed, good night, I love you. So the next morning I get up, I'm going to work. My husband's retired. I go and leave about 7 o'clock in the morning, thinking usually Chris is up having a cup of coffee. And I thought, well, I'm glad he got to sleep, because he didn't sleep very well. So my husband went in about 11 o'clock in the morning to see if he'd like to go grab some lunch with him. And he walked in, and he saw him collapsed in his bed, dead. He went up and touched him, and he was cold. No parent, as they say, should bury a child, but certainly no parent should find one dead in their bed. It has changed our lives forever. It was the day before Thanksgiving, so no Thanksgiving will ever be the same. Through great detective work, we had a couple of good investigators. They found out the trail of Chris had relapsed. He reached out on Facebook Messenger, asked another addict, hey, could you get me something? We didn't know at that time what it was until the toxicology report came back. And he had, in his system, he had heroin with a lethal dose of fentanyl. So he was murdered. This young lady that got him the drugs was arrested. There was a solid case against her. She was an addict. We knew Chris wouldn't want her to bear the full brunt of what had happened. He'd want to take another dealer off of the street. So they offered her a deal, dropping her delivery causing death just to delivery in order for her to turn evidence against the dealer. By this time, it was several months after our son had died, and the dealer was already in jail for another drug offense that was headed up by Janet. So they proceeded with that case, and then only if that case didn't pan out would they pick up Chris's case, because they were going to run concurrent. So any amount of testimony that we were to give would have been for naught, because he wouldn't serve one extra day for it. So the Janet case went fine. He was convicted, and we were involved in the sentencing. We could go for the sentencing hearing. And as it would have it, the same judge that sentenced the previous dealer that Chris testified against and only got 3 years, same judge on this case. So the defendant spoke in front of the judge, pleading his case very uneloquently and saying how he had messed up, but really, I've been a great guy for the last several years, haven't been in any trouble, things have been good, I've turned my life around. And our prosecutor got up and said, well, let me tell you just how he's turned his life around, why he hasn't been in trouble. He'd been in jail since 2006 on armed robbery and several other drug charges. He had just gotten out in September of 2018, 2 months before he killed our son. Sentence guidelines, 11 to 23 years. What'd she give him? Yep, 11. Our son was murdered by this man. Now, that wasn't what he was charged with at that trial. But still, he got 11 years. The sentence guidelines have to change. Give the judges better tools. You're going to have some judges that are only going to give them the minimum. She was a drug court judge. She did a wonderful job with addicts, but she viewed a lot of the dealers as addicts. Those people are out to make money. They're cutting all the heroin, whatever, with fentanyl because they make more money. They're killing our loved ones. Last thing, when Chris used to go with Mike and speak, he used to say to the kids, to look the other way is to give permission. We had bands made up with that saying. He'd tell the kids, if you knew somebody was up the street raping or stealing from somebody, you'd turn them in. If you see somebody with carload of people coming in your driveway selling drugs, turn them in. So I'm asking you, please, don't look the other way anymore. Thank you.
Very nice.
Thanks. And this is my son, by the way. I'm sure you knew that. I bring him with me.
I shall be brief. A lot of the things I was going to talk about this morning have already been said. Madam Chairman, I appreciate this opportunity. Yes, Chris was a good friend of mine, and I remember the day in court when the dealer got up and he says, "Geez, Your Honor, he said, I'm going to be really good. I'm going to get myself in rehab, and I'm going to do all the right things from here on." I wanted to scream from where I was sitting in that courtroom. He's not an addict. He is lying to you right now. This is a common game they play constantly. Take you into the world of the drug dealer. Yes, he's a person who makes his living off another man's demise. Lowest form of income you could possibly think of. But number two is, most people think that these people out here, they're all addicts too, and we can help those. They're not addicts. They have no intention of being an addict. They wouldn't touch that drug in a million years because they know exactly what it does to you. They know that once you start on that drug, they will be able to drain you for every penny you have, and they could care less whether you live or die. That type of person, that type of mentality cannot be tolerated in this country. Now, the state of Michigan has done some fabulous things here. Since my son died in 2010, he was one of the few cases that we got delivery of heroin causing death. He was a good kid. He was an athlete. He's a student, and he had 4 wonderful sisters. And it still pains me today, as it does Julie, to talk about that. This is something that lives with people the rest of their lives, and we have 100 and some thousand every single year dying and having to suffer from this. We have kids that will no longer have parents, no longer have a mom, maybe no longer have a dad. We'll have siblings that have lost ones, and it just goes on and on and on. Now, this doesn't just affect that generation. What about those kids that have lost their mom or their dad? It's affecting their life from here on down the road. This is a generational thing that we have to put a stop to. We have to say no. We have to draw a red line somewhere along the line. I'm about as most compassionate person in the world for treating somebody under that has a drug problem. Andy's Place was named after my son. An initiative started by Governor Snyder and continued on with Governor Whitmer. We're showing fantastic success with the treatment courts. It was the first project in the entire country to put the treatment courts, the private sector, together and create this affordable, supportive living. We have 50 people over there, and we only average 1 relapse a month. These numbers are unheard of. So my goal, and my goal has been since my son passed away, was to create awareness to this problem out there right now. I think we've done a good job of that. My other thought process is, how can we get these people? How can we get people like Andy Hurst, my son, who was a good kid, never wanted to be a drug addict, didn't even like to drink, but he took a pill that was an opiate, and he really liked the way that made him feel. And it continued on and on. And just like every other kid, we can't afford the pill, so now we switched to heroin. Well, now the heroin's cut with fentanyl. This is a problem that's destroying the moral fiber of this country right now. And we have the opportunity to do something about it. You know, Michigan was first with Andy's Place, with that first project in the country that also won a national award for the best affordable housing project in the entire country. We started with that. Now let's add to that. Let's put some of these people into quarantine. Now, you can call it jail, you can call it prison, I call it quarantine. You can't be on my streets. You cannot walk the streets with the good people of this country and sell this stuff to them. We will not let you. It's up to you guys to decide how long that is, but I'm saying you cannot be on our streets. We're going to protect our young, we're going to protect our families, and we are not going to give an inch on this issue. And we will do everything in the world to treat those that are one of the people whose lives you destroyed. And we will continue to do that, and we certainly need your help. We need your help to quarantine these people and get them out of our hair and get them off our streets so we can do our work. And we have at least 50 people right now sitting in a housing complex that they would either be dead or in jail, and they'll tell you that right now today. Well, they're not dead and they're not in jail. They're with their kids. They have jobs. And they're continuing their recovery thanks to the treatment courts, thanks to the state of Michigan. So I'm just sitting here today to tell you, hey, let's not talk about what we can't do. Let's talk about what we can do, and let's go out there and do it. And I thank you so much for that opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you both for your testimony, and I'm sorry for your losses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes testimony on 5124 through 5126. Representative Filler, I understand you have an announcement to make.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair. Over here in the white coats in the corner, I'm happy to recognize the Sparrow OBGYN residency program, which my wife Alicia helps run. And they're here learning about the legislative advocacy process today, so I'm happy to recognize these physicians for their hard work. Thank you, Chair.
We will now, excuse me, have a vote on House Bill 5271. We heard testimony on this last week. Do we have any cards on this one? No cards on this one? Okay. Representative Breen moves to adopt the H1 substitute for HB 5271. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
To adopt the substitute H1 to House Bill 5271, Chair Hope,
Yes.
Representative Sanders.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Green.
Aye.
Young.
Yes.
Arbit.
Yes.
Devendorf.
Yes.
Cerniglu.
Yes.
Filler.
Pass.
Mueller.
Pass.
Bazat.
Pass.
Harris.
Pass.
Begol.
Pass.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 0 nays, 5 pass. The motion prevails.
Thank you. I'll now take a motion from Representative Carter to report HB 5271 with recommendation as substitute H1. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Chair Hope,
Yes.
Representative Sanders,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Green,
Aye.
Young,
Yes.
Arbit,
Yes.
Devendorf,
Yes.
Cerniglu,
Yes.
Filler,
No.
Mueller,
Pass.
Bazat,
No.
Harris,
No.
Begol.
Pass.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 3 nays, 2 pass. House Bill 5271 is reported with recommendation as substitute H1.
Thank you. We'll now vote on HB 5431. We also took testimony on this last week. It's the Wrongful Imprisonment Compensation Act. I'll take a motion to adopt the substitute for HB 5431. Representative Young moves. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Chair Hope,
Yes.
Representative Sanders.
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Green,
Aye.
Young,
Yes.
Arbit,
Yes.
Devendorf,
Yes.
Cerniglu,
Yes.
Filler,
Pass.
Mueller,
No.
Bazat,
Pass.
Harris,
Pass.
Begol.
Pass.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 1 nay, 4 pass. The substitute is adopted.
Thank you. Representative Andrews moves to report HB 5431 with recommendation as substitute H1. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Chair Hope.
Yes.
Representatives Andrews.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Green.
Aye.
Young.
Yes.
Arbit.
Yes.
Devendorf.
Yes.
Cerniglu.
Yes.
Filler.
Pass.
Mueller.
No.
Bazat.
No.
Harris.
No.
Begol.
Pass.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 3 nays, 2 pass. House Bill 5431 is reported with recommendation as substitute H1.
Thank you. We'll now have votes on 5182 and 5183. These are the bills that would ban pro-pads and criminalize pro-pads. We took testimony on these bills way back on February 6th. Do you have any cards? We do have a couple of cards. Matt Saxton from the Michigan Sheriff's Association does not wish to speak, supports the bill. Barb Farah from GCSI, representing the City of Detroit and the Detroit Police Department, supports the bill, does not wish to speak. Representative Arbit moves to adopt the H2 substitute for HB 5182. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Chair Hope.
Yes.
Representatives Andrews.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Green.
Aye.
Young.
Yes.
Arbit.
Yes.
Devendorf.
Yes.
Cerniglu.
Yes.
Filler.
Yes.
Mueller.
Yes.
Bazat.
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
Begol.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 13 yeas, 0 nays, and 0 pass. The substitute is adopted.
Thank you. Representative Devendorf moves to report HB 5182 with recommendation as substitute H2. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Chair Hope.
Yes.
Representatives Andrews.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Breen.
Aye.
Young.
Yes.
Arbit.
Yes.
Devendorf.
Yep.
Cerniglu.
Yes.
Filler.
Yes.
Mueller.
Yes.
Bazat.
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
Begol.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 13 yeas, 0 nays, and 0 pass. House Bill 5182 is reported with recommendation as substitute H2.
Thank you. Representative Cerniglu moves to adopt the H1 substitute for HB 5183. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Chair Hope.
Yes.
Representatives Andrews.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Green.
Aye.
Young.
Yes.
Arbit.
Yes.
Devendorf.
Yes.
Cerniglu.
Yes.
Filler.
Yes.
Mueller.
Yes.
Bazat.
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
Begol.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 13 yeas, 0 nays, and 0 pass. The substitute is adopted.
Thank you. Representative Andrews moves to report HB 5183 with recommendation as substitute H1. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Chair Hope.
Yes.
Representatives Andrews.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Breen.
Aye.
Young.
Yes.
Arbit.
Yes.
Devendorf.
Yes.
Cerniglu.
Yes.
Filler.
Yes.
Mueller.
Yes.
Bazat.
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
Begol.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 13 yeas, 0 nays, and 0 pass. House Bill 5183 is reported with recommendation as substitute H1.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And with no further business before the committee, we stand adjourned.
Thanks, Chair.